Greetings, this is Eugene the Philosopher, the greatest living philosopher after the unfortunate passing of Quentin Robert de Nameland, who has been the greatest living philosopher before me. In this video, we shall continue our ongoing, so to speak, meta-analysis of culture, and we will treat, or rather examine another phenomenon that I would call loci of attention. And, well, it's sort of a stupid name, but when I was thinking about the concept, I kind of stuck, so I just thought, what the hell, let's leave it as it is. So, of course, you might say it's not loci. I mean, it's plural of locus, right? So, location, a place. Of course, you might say it should be loci in Imperial Latin, which is the only decent form of Latin, not the stupid ecclesiastical one with loti, right? Or loci or whatever. Loki, that sounds manly. But whatever, maybe it's pronounced loci in English. So anyway, in order for me to reveal what I understand by this concept and what this whole video is about, I would have to repeat a little bit some points from my previous videos, and actually the points that are, again, outlined by other philosophers, or even philosophers before me, maybe even by de Nameland himself. So, the general concept is that, again, we have now a perception of a culture as a network, right? Rather than a set of hierarchies or whatever. And in this network, we construct objects. So, an object, again, treated very broadly, may be perceived as sort of like a node in the network, right? So it's supported by many other things, perhaps many other objects or entities of whatever nature, and through this support, it gains its ontology, so to speak. It comes to life, right? So, like previous mechanistical, so to speak, view of let's say, culture and nature may have said, no, you know, objects are just there. We just discover them, etc., etc. But in my previous videos, I've stated many times how this is a wrong concept. And again, I repeat basically almost word by word what Bruno Latour says about this. So if you're interested, you might read him. But anyway, so the idea is that we have a network, and objects represent like nodes of the network, like some places of power, if you like. And so an object feeds off of this supportive network, right? Or at least parts of the network of culture that is somehow connected to this object. And through that support, it comes into being itself. But we have some situations where the network is sort of there. I mean, all this support is sort of there. But the object is not quite there. Or at least it's not really an object or something like that. So it is these things, these places where the object kind of is but kind of isn't, that I call loci of attention, right? Places of where some attention is needed or is applied already, right? So these, you might perhaps call it quasi-objects, but I thought it would be a really dull way of calling it. Well, it just sounds too silly. I mean, it sounds too vague, ambiguous, and really, I don't know, it's kind of this kind of thing. So, again, locus of attention is a place in the cultural network where an object probably should be, and maybe even is, but it's not yet sort of enveloped itself completely, right? Something like that. And again, obviously, I mean, in two obvious cases, such a situation might arise. So one case is when an object is sort of under construction already, but is not yet constructed. So we have already, you know, put all the maintenance, all the, you know, pipelines and electricity and water and roads to the building, and perhaps the scaffolding is there, but the building is not yet, you know, erected. So this is one situation. And another situation where such a locus of attention might appear would be when an object was there previously, but it sort of was dismantled, right? Again, an analogy with the building would be good here. Like, I don't know, like there was like some, I don't know, railway station where a lot of railroads would meet, but it was like bombed during the war or something, so it doesn't work anymore. So all the roads are there, but the railroad station kind of isn't, right? So it kind of is, but it sort of isn't, right? Something like that. That's a stupid example, I know, but it kind of illustrates the point, right? All right. So in the first situation where, well, it's kind of obvious, right? So the network is already ready to form the node to kind of crystallize, solidify this object, but for some reason it's not there yet. And the reason might being, again, most obvious one would be like another competing network perhaps inserts its argument against it, right? Something like that. So like the conditions are good already, but not quite good yet. We need to somehow get rid of that foreign influence of this other subnetwork to establish our object. Or maybe more than one subnetwork is against it for some reason again. And you know, for this situation, there's a saying, I believe in English it sounds like throne is never vacant. So kind of like the kingdom is there, so someone should be on the throne, you know. Some object should be inserted into this place for everything to start working, or otherwise everything else makes no sense. This supportive network cannot find its own purpose, even in some stupid metaphysical sense or mystical sense even. But even though I don't really insert any mysticism into this concept, it's very pragmatic and practical, really. Okay, so examples of that, again, you probably may think of several ones yourself, but I would propose dark matter, for example, again, a thing we've talked about on this channel a lot, which is very illustrative in many respects of how science works, exactly for this reason, because it's the locus of attention. It's an object that is not yet really constructed, and therefore you can see all the machinery behind what is usually considered established science, right? You can see all of its blunders, and therefore you can examine it more closely, because through these blunders it kind of gets a little bit naked, if you know what I mean. Like, it's not in its full glory, full, you know, armor, etc. So yeah, it's very cool in this regard. Well, again, so everything is ready. Like, everyone pretty much considers that dark matter exists. Well, by everyone, I mean, I'm exaggerating, obviously, but you know what I mean. So, but it's not quite there yet, you know. So Newton's laws support it, like observations support it, like many authorities support it, etc. Money is obviously flowing into the area, into this research, etc. But it cannot yet be constructed for some reason, or maybe multiple reasons, but which are, again, beyond the scope of this video. So another example might be, again, this vaccination and stuff, like how the evil government tries to poison us all, etc. Again, all the networks are ready for it to be established as like a truth, but it's not yet established for many reasons. One of them is, again, the government being against such an idea, obviously, but maybe it's not really true for other reasons, so other people propose arguments against it, etc., etc. There are statistical examples against it, etc., etc., etc. But yet there is a definite cultural network supporting the existence of such object. Well, again, object in a broad sense, like a bad vaccine, something like that, or maybe even in a broader sense that all vaccines are bad, or something like that, right? And 5G, the same thing, like harmful 5G would be our locus of attention, right? And how it kills people or indoctrinates them or whatever, harms them in any other way, and blah, blah, blah. I've even encountered very exotic ideas, like how, I wouldn't talk about this. I mean, some people might consider it like a personal attack if I would recite what they said to me. Okay, so Mikronova, Ekaterina Mikronova, of course, again, the periodically exploding sun, right, would be our locus of attention, which is, again, it cannot be constructed because, well, for many reasons. Some of them I've already listed in my video, Ben Davidson and Suspicious Observers. Like, it's about a year old on this channel. So one of the reasons is the lack of mechanism of how sun can explode, etc. And many other reasons are there as well. But there's a lot of support in this sub-network that kind of wants to crystallize this object, right? In particular, like the American desire, the American obsession with the end of the world, for example, which is, again, sort of supported by American influence in cultural sense in general. So if it was like, I don't know, Indonesian obsession with the end of the world, maybe people wouldn't really care about it that much, right? But since it's American, so as you can see, it's a very long network, and there's a lot of how do you say it? Well, a lot of supporting branches to it, basically. Okay. Then I might even mention my own idea about the biogenic earthquake hypothesis, how perhaps microorganisms or macro, who knows, organisms that may exist in the very, very deep subsurface of the Earth, their activity may influence seismic activity, right? So there's a lot of networks that kind of allow us to construct something in the middle that would kind of feed off of all of them, right? One network is this relatively recent realization of the importance of, let's say, electric currents in, well, the Earth and its surroundings, etc. So these organisms may feed from these electric currents and at the same time be connected to the like larger spheres of Earth, like magnetosphere, ionosphere, etc., through these currents or like whatever electromagnetic influences. And at the same time, the ongoing research into a very deep biosphere and like extremophiles, etc., and the like alternative seismicity research and like the this everlasting hope that we would someday be able to predict earthquakes, right? So all of this can be condensed. Oh, and by the way, the discovery of actual microorganisms that feed off electric currents. So it all kind of comes together. It all can be brought together to this point, and be condensed into this new object, which would be those subterranean organisms that cause earthquakes. Yet it's not really constructed yet, again. But the locus of attention is there. Definitely that's the place where something might crystallize in the future. Who knows? Or maybe not. Then you might think about particle physics, where literally like how many of the particles were discovered, if you know what I mean, constructed basically. It's through, so let's say we build a plot of how many reactions occur at this energy. So how many, let's say how many particles we detect at certain energy. This is not really the case, but an approximation, let's say. So how many particles we detect versus the energy of colliding particles. Let's say we collide two protons. So how many particles fly out of there versus the energy of those protons. And so we observe like, I don't know, some relatively smooth curve, but then we observe some peaks here at this energy, then a peak here at that energy. Like, I mean, there's a lot of particles suddenly, then as you increase the energy, there's again a small amount of particles, then a large amount again, then a small amount again, etc. And those peaks are associated with new particles. So people think, well, at this energy, some new process is already able to happen. So there's, let's say, enough energy to produce some new particle, and therefore all the processes that are associated with this new particle can take place because there's already enough energy, and therefore we get this burst of events, right? Burst of whatever products of reactions we observe. So, and these particles are called resonances. Initially, they were, at least. And well, it makes me think about, I'm digressing, but I'll try to keep it short. So it made me think about the point I made at the EU conference in England in 2019, where we talked about the cold fusion, and so the point was, like, you know, the usual idea of how do we achieve fusion is to basically increase temperature, right, and pressure. So the idea is that if you increase temperature and pressure, it gives protons or whatever other particles enough energy to finally penetrate this mutual Coulomb barrier, this repulsion, and unite into helium or whatever. But the point I was making is that it's a really brute force type of approach, because what you really need, perhaps that was the idea, is not just pump energy, because thermal energy is chaotic, right? It's the most chaotic form of energy. So you are basically wasting the absolute majority of your energy into nothing, to only a very, very small part of it to be actually responsible for this reaction, right? So it's a very ineffective way of achieving fusion through temperature and pressure, probably. But the more efficient way, the more reasonable way, it's sort of like a more taekwondo, you know, type of way, would be to actually look for ways of directing the energy exactly where it needs to be, right? And so obviously the concept of resonance comes into play. Like you don't just excite all the frequencies of whatever oscillators, all the thermal frequencies. You just excite only one frequency, but the one that is the needed for this reaction to occur, almost like, you know, tuning forks. So in some abstract sense, but obviously, I mean, frequency is associated with energy, I mean, through Planck's relation at the very least. So what I'm saying is cold fusion is not such a stupid idea, because again, it's not guaranteed that the thermal way is the only way, and in fact it looks like the most stupid way, right? Like you're just throwing all of the energy like into nothing to achieve very little, right? Like throw everything against the wall and see only a little bit of it stick. Well, what if we just use a little bit of energy and put it right there where it's stuck, right? So but whatever, that was a stupid digression. So my point was that returning to the idea of the video, so that's how elementary particles were constructed or discovered, at least some of them, again called resonances. Most of them are hadrons or hadrons, probably hadrons, or even all of them. I don't exactly know, but whatever. So the idea is that we observe a peak, and there is a supportive network that says, okay, that might be an object. We might construct it into an object. And so we construct it into a new particle, and we say, okay, it's a new particle with these and these properties, etc. I mean, observing what it transforms into, whatever we observe at the end. All right, so that was the first situation when the locus of attention might appear, right? When the network is ready and like everything, all the communications are already there, but the object is not yet constructed. The second type of situation would be when an already existing, already established object is being dismantled. So, and like what remains of it is some sort of like a ghost, you know, which would be again sort of like a quasi-object, a locus of attention, essentially. And in case of like, as an example, you might think of all the debunked pseudoscience. Again, see my video of pseudoscience and scientific pyramids, where I say that this term is actually a stupid term, but whatever. Like you might think about homeopathy, like flat earth, or like ether, or whatever. Like, again, as I've stated many times, like ether really is just electromagnetic field. Like, what modern physics calls electromagnetic field is what, like, in the early 20th century was called ether. Like, it's literally the same thing. So I don't even know why those ether people are constantly so, I don't know, so annoyed or so, like, vigilant about ether. Like it's just electromagnetic field. It's literally the same thing, but whatever. So all these concepts, they were sort of debunked, right? But no matter how I mean, you probably noticed that no matter how many times you debunk flat earth, again, debunk is also a stupid concept to debunk something, like as if you had the truth, you know, again, which is a stupid concept. I would claim that they just try to counteract the flat earth network, let's say, with their own network of whatever else they're proposing to you. And just pressure you through that, like through their power of this network versus this network. So this is what debunking is all about. So yeah, but again, the point I'm making is that still ether is the locus of attention. It's not like, again, no matter how many times you debunk it, it's gonna be there. Like, and it's like legit survives in the culture, and it's still there. And as a general comment, I would say that actually, in all of cases, or almost all of cases, the objects in cultures, objects again such as ideas or concepts or these kinds of objects like ether, etc., they rarely, if at all, disappear, you know. So an idea might lie dormant for a century, let's say, and then suddenly reappear in its full glory when some new network would arise that would act in its support. It's easily possible. I didn't prepare any examples of this sort. I haven't really thought about it, but many modern ideas may be found in works of thinkers of like 17th century easily. It's just that, again, the societal, cultural, technological situation was completely different, so these ideas perhaps did not find their supportive networks yet, and therefore these objects were not able to crystallize as they did today, let's say, which is again another illustration of what I'm talking about. All right, so that would be all, probably, actually. So to conclude what I was talking about, well, I've introduced this concept of locus of attention, or loci of attention, plural, or Loci of attention, if you prefer the manly imperial Latin, which is something akin to a quasi-object. Namely, locus of attention is a place in the network, in the cultural network, where we expect an object to be, but where it's not there for some reason, right? Or you might think about no man's land in a war, let's say. So in a war, let's say, like a primitive thinking about a war with a front line, you know, a front line may shift due to some battles, advancements of forces, etc. So let's say this city is now under control of this side, So it's like an object. It's now their city, right? It's their city is like a new object, so to speak. Whereas it might happen that the city is in no man's land. It's not really controlled by neither of the sides. So it's this locus of attention, right? It's where things happen, because it's where the battles are going on, and no one really knows where it's gonna shift, like whose it's gonna be in the end, etc. So again, it helps to see how these supportive networks work. Again, I've already made this point about science, how dark matter, in particular, as an example, helps to observe how science actually works, because that's where science actually blunders. So, I mean, mainstream science, and therefore you can see how it actually operates. Like, not like all the hindsight justifications of how it developed in its own eyes, how it, glorifies all of its achievements and like says, oh, those geniuses, etc. They knew what the nature was all about, etc. But no, you actually observe how it really happens, and it's not that smooth and clean, right? Okay, so hopefully this concept of loci of attention or locus of attention, singular, helps illustrate the point about networks and objects that I'm making in many of my videos. All right. Or another example. Well, it might be a stupid example, but it seems like a good one to finish off this video. It's like, a family, like, after a child is born, a family really starts almost like rotating around the child, right? Sometimes even parents hate each other, but they don't like divorce for a child, right? So a child is an object in this case, whereas the parents are supportive networks. So if there is no child yet, so that would be a locus of attention. So, and that examining these situations, these childless families, help us observe parents more, because, well, there's no child, and we can observe parents more closely than otherwise, because when there is a child, like, parents don't really care about themselves that much as without it, right? So that's kind of, well, it's such a silly example, but whatever. You get what you paid for, which is nothing, as I've already said once. Okay, thank you for watching. The eons are closing.